Do you ever find yourself stuck in a mental time machine, forced to watch movies of your partner's past that you never wanted to see? You see their face, you hear their laugh, and a single innocent detail can send you down a rabbit hole of obsessive thoughts, painful questions, and a jealousy that feels like it's eating you alive. Today, I'll be talking with Kayla Tricaso, Associate Marriage and Family Therapist at Modern Intimacy, about retroactive jealousy. Kayla, thanks for joining me today.
I really consider like what is the level of impairment that this is having on a person's life and like how impactful is it? Because we all deal with relationship difficulties or anxieties. That's pretty normal, but sometimes things are beyond what is manageable. And if it is resulting in like the disruption of relationships or feeling like you're losing sleep or not being able to focus at work and it just feels like this is taking over your life, it might be indicative that it's, pretty destabilizing and debilitating. And that might require, yeah, a little bit more assistance than like a maybe more typical relationship issue.
Yeah, if the anxiety is really getting in the way of you living the life you're trying to live or having the relationship that you want to have with your partner, it's a good indicator that maybe more focus would help give you some ease.
I think for the person on the other end, it can be really hard not to kind of like defend your position, and understandably, because this is, something your partner is upset about that happened before you might have met. It doesn't really necessarily involve them, but it is still causing rupture and conflict in the relationship. That urge to defend makes a lot of sense. And what could be another way to handle it is to like really kind of take a step back and interrupt that process, because for the partner who's going through the retroactive jealousy, they are kind of inundated with all of these intrusive thoughts. And really the most helpful thing in that moment is to interrupt that and kind of stop it in its tracks. So that could look like kind of pausing, taking a little bit of time away from each other, like going for 10, 15, 20 minutes into another room and literally just stopping the process right in the middle and coming back when there's a bit more regulation. But I also like to let partners know, like, you're allowed to set boundaries around this kind of stuff. It can be really intense to have like an interrogation type of conversation. So also don't be afraid to set your own boundaries about when you can talk about this, how you would like to talk about it, and what you need in that moment to feel like you're capable of being present for that kind of conversation.
I love that reminder. It's, I think, so hard sometimes in relationships when your partner is clearly in a lot of distress. You want to often be part of the solution for your partner. But in the situation of retroactive jealousy, sometimes a partner is putting a lot of shame or a lot of judgment on you because they are feeling some unworthiness or some inadequacy. So there's a bit of an unconscious desire to transfer some of that shame and have it be the partner's fault or the partner did something bad or wrong. So I like to remind partners that your previous sex and relationship life is nothing to be ashamed of, no matter how many sexual partners you've had or what kind of sexual behavior you experienced, right? And you don't need to carry shame that is not yours if that's part of what you feel coming toward you.
Right. When I think of a schema of unlovability, what really comes to mind is this feeling of inadequacy and this feeling of like not enoughness. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. Things like that usually are at the core of that. And with retroactive jealousy, there is so much around comparison, like comparing yourself to a partner's past romantic or sexual partners. And that can be everything from how those partners looked or what kind of like successes they might have had. And it really can bring up those feelings of, I'm not worthy of being with this person. I'm not good enough to be with this person. And I think that's just as important to acknowledge as is the behaviors that are happening, because those behaviors likely come from somewhere. So, really kind of spending some time, I think, digging into those wounds and getting more information about where does this belief come from? Where did I learn to feel this way? And how can I ask for what I need from a more aligned place can really help kind of, again, like, cut through those intrusive thoughts and meet your partner with a bit more vulnerability around, like, what the actual pain point is in those moments.
Yeah. Also, I think what is very common in partnerships where retroactive jealousy is present is there's a desire for reassurance, but then when
Yes.
reassurance is provided, it isn't believed. So I think
Mhm.
another thing to be curious about if you're the person who is experiencing retroactive jealousy is what information would I need to have from my partner or within myself or from the world that I would actually begin to trust what my partner is telling me about why they're choosing to be with me and really believing that they see my inherent worthiness to be in this relationship, even if I don't.
Yeah, that's a great point, and also kind of harkens back to when there's conflict around this, is that a lot of partners will just try to reassure the person suffering with RJ, and to your point, it doesn't actually help, or it's only temporarily soothing.
Mhm.
Like, what you're saying is, like, getting to the deeper issue of, like, what that unmet need is, or what the bid for connection is,
Mhm.
rather than soothing or reassuring the belief. With this aspect of retroactive jealousy, I think it can be really helpful to kind of go back into early messaging. Where do these beliefs come from? Because a lot of times they are attached to things like socialization. They're not necessarily things we inherently believe, they're things that we might have been taught to believe, or things that come with socialization. And with retroactive jealousy, I think it's really, with retroactive jealousy, I think there are a couple different ways to look at them. One of it being like around, what are your beliefs with gender, gendered expectations, and gendered roles? What are your beliefs about sex and intimacy? What are your beliefs about relationships? And are those congruent with how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see others? Or are these things that you've been taught to believe through socialization or through some sort of societal or cultural messaging? And you get to make those distinctions for yourself. There might be some things that you hold on to from, upbringing, but there might be some things that don't really serve you or aren't actually in alignment with how you feel. So I think getting some clarity around what's your authentic belief versus what might have been taught to you. But I also think it can be really helpful to, like, actually personify or externalize the RJ self via, like, I don't know if you've seen books where, like, one chapter is from one person's perspective and the other chapter shifts to another person's. I like to kind of do that with clients where one chapter or one page of a journal entry will be spoken from the RJ self, and then the next page or other chapter, if you will be spoken from the true self. That can put a little bit of separation between the judgment, the pain, the criticism that might be attached to that RJ self, so that someone can look at it with clear eyes and maybe develop some empathy or compassion for that part and not see it all as bad or damaged or whatever kind of association there might be with it.
I love that. I mean, it's a really beautiful way to illustrate the information that the RJ parts are trying to communicate to someone about their fears and sort of their underlying core beliefs without actually making it a truth and having no one to counterbalance it. It's a great exercise.
When someone is kind of outside of that window of tolerance or their like optimal level where they feel like they're able to kind of function, go about their day, they might notice some physiological symptoms that can look like their heart beating really fast, or maybe like feeling their body temperature rise, maybe feeling like their thoughts are all of a sudden really like fast paced, racing. It's hard to like get a grasp on kind of how you're feeling or thinking. And then emotionally, you might notice that you feel really irritable. You might notice like a really tiny thing kind of sends you into like kind of like a big anger burst. And so it's really about kind of like noticing where your baseline's at and seeing if there's been a shift outside of where you typically sit. And if that is towards a place that does feel really activated, like almost like you can't sit still, like there's a surge of energy and like a almost fight or flight response, might mean that you have gone outside of your window of tolerance or in that hyper arousal state. And what I think can be a really helpful exercise because it's so accessible in most environments is a nervous system exercise called Borders of the Body.
Mm.
And it's basically just like kind of giving yourself a little squeeze, just going all the way down your arms and at whatever pace feels comfortable. But with this exercise, it can one kind of help you reconnect to yourself in like a really physical way, almost kind of like giving yourself a hug, like it's going to be okay, but also it can help you like really like tactilely connect with the sensation of touch, which can be really grounding. I think that one's a pretty easy one you can do in almost any environment you might be in.
Yeah, it's so portable. No one would even know what you're doing. And it's something that you can exercise with a lot of discretion when you really need it. I love that.
Right. It's a great question because I do think some people will kind of come into therapy with a hope that it will eliminate the thoughts.
Mm,
And the way that I usually like to reframe that is I can't promise that I can make these thoughts go away, but what I will commit and show up to help you do is help you have a better sense of tolerating them. Like instead of elimination, can we build tools and resources and empowerment so that when those moments happen, you do feel like you have all you need, the tools and the capacity to show up for yourself in that moment and really be able to regulate, to communicate with a partner. It's not really about the thoughts, the feelings going away, but feeling like you have it in yourself to be able to manage them when they do arise.
I like that. So it's not really setting this unrealistic expectation that you're never going to have these thoughts again. It's more about learning to metabolize them and not attach so much meaning or crisis to them in the moment.
Absolutely. And feeling like there's other tools that you can turn to. I also like to let people know or kind of frame it in this way that you are a tool yourself. Like you are a tool that you can use when these moments arise. You have everything you need in you. It's just about knowing when and what to use when you are feeling like those thoughts or those feelings are, coming more heightened to the surface. I think this is something that's really important, not just beyond the question of do you treat this, but also like, well, what does that look like? Because I think sometimes there can be confusion or not quite sure about what treatment for something like retroactive jealousy looks like. So I think one question could be, if I were your client, how might you help me navigate some of these specific pain points I've mentioned, or like what would be the best approach to treatment out of the few that I've learned about that can be helpful for retroactive jealousy. So, getting a little bit more clarity about that can be helpful.
Mhm.
And also, it might be helpful too to maybe ask your therapist when they have worked with people suffering from RJ, what are some benchmarks of success? And that can look different for every person, but it could be helpful to know like what these different parameters look like. Because, like we said earlier, it's not really about making the thoughts go away, but maybe it would be helpful to know like what else could this look like? How else can I feel a bit more in control? How else can I feel more empowered to get through these moments? We just say that just to validate the experience of it, it is a really tough thing to go through. Jealousy in any form, but I think retroactive jealousy particularly feels like really complicated and layered, and it's not always as understood. Most people can have had some sort of experience where they have felt jealousy, but retroactive jealousy kind of takes on a different texture and shape. And so not everyone kind of can fully grasp what it's like to be so preoccupied and consumed by a partner's past. So if it is something that you're struggling with, I really, just want to communicate that there is help out there And there are, really skilled therapists who can help you navigate this so that you can feel like you can, live your life in relationships with, intention, purpose, and fulfillment.
Amazing. Thank you. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you think this video might be helpful for somebody who is navigating retroactive jealousy, feel free to send it along with their permission, of course. All right, take care.